Welcome to The People I Know, a philosophical podcast with and about the diverse people I've met over the years as an African-American female thinker, dancer, aerialist, dog lover, and off-grid enthusiast. Today's guest is performance artist, educator, trainer, and founder of Polecology and Postpartum, Dr. Kristen Nicole, also known as the Polecologist. Enjoy.
My name is Dr. Kristen Nicole, but I like to be called Kristen Nicole, whatever.
What are all the hats that you wear?
Yes, wow, so many. Okay, so yes, Dr. Kristen Nicole. I got my doctor in psychology. In 2020. Yes, in 2020. Wow, it's been almost a year. I graduated with my PhD in applied social and community psychology. And so that's how I got my doctor title. So what I do with that is I'm an entrepreneur. I have this kind of thing I do where I don't really fit like labels. So I started pole dancing when I was in graduate school to kind of cope with stress. And I've always been very artistic and into movement and dance. And I just kind of fell in love with it while I was in graduate school. And so when I was finishing up my PhD and I wrote my dissertation on identity development and storytelling. And so when I was finishing up my degree, I really started planning for my business because I knew I just didn't want to get into academia as a full-time professor. I fell in love with pole dancing and I knew I wanted to teach pole in a way that would help people to find liberation, to complement their self-work, right? Their own psychological self-work that they're doing with therapy or independently on their own in many different ways. And I just wanted to help people to create a pole practice that could assist with that using my own skills. And so that is what I do. I am a instructor at Polecology, which is my business, my pole and liberation coaching business. I teach pole dance. I also teach pole fitness. I have a certification as a group fitness instructor by the American Council on Exercise. I also have a certification to teach pole fitness by Expert. And so I kind of bring everything together with my business Polecology, which is all about liberation through pole fitness dance and flexibility training. Yeah, I think that's
it. Thank you. And even though I did used to live in South Florida, we never physically crossed paths. We have only met online. I guess we've seen each other's work online at some point a few years ago. And I remember reaching out, seeing your studies, what you're doing. And I was thinking, wow, I do philosophy, you do psychology, and we both love pole. There's got to be some overlap there. Mm-hmm. And eventually, yes, here we are getting to do some kind of work together. And yeah. So with this being a season of the Black folks I know, I want to know why being Black matters to you, or why it doesn't, and why it doesn't. Let's start with one at a time. Yeah, why and when does being Black matter for you, either personally or professionally?
Wow, I really love this question. I love both sides of the question. I think I'm the type of person where I'm the type of Black person where being Black really does matter to me. And I think it's that way for many different reasons. I guess I could start from earlier in my life as a teenager. So I went to a predominantly Black high school. So in high school, I was very used to just being around my people that looked like me. It was very normal. In fact, the listeners can't see me, but I'm a lighter skinned Black person. So I kind of always was made fun of a little bit, like, oh, you're a pineapple or a coconut or whatever they say, like, white on the inside, black on the outside. Because before I went to high school, I actually went to another school for middle school that was predominantly white. And so just like, being around that environment, the way I speak reflects that. And so coming into like an all Black high school, I kind of got made fun of, I think, which really reflects people's own internalized racism and like notions of like what it means to be Black that I understand now. But that was my norm. And so after that, when I, grew into my adulthood in college and graduate school, that experience shifted. I was not the white Black girl. I was like the Black person, and it was just like, wow, I'm called to be a representative of my race, going to more predominantly white institutions for higher learning. So it is through that experience and then my high school experience as well that I really came to understand what it means for me to be Black. And I really fell in love with like learning all of like my history of, African Americans, because I do identify as African American. And I feel very, very proud of that. And so that's why I say being Black is an important part of my experience. It's actually an important part of my work as well. Like I would say more broadly being someone who is aware, like being a part of like multiple oppressed groups, because I identify as Black and also queer. And so that can be interesting. So yeah, I'd say it's very important to me and also important to my work as well. Because it's not like I can, unless you're just hearing my voice, you might think that I'm not Black, depending on what you think sounding Black means. But I can't really take my race off of me. So that's really like the first thing people notice when they see me is that I'm Black.
We were just talking about that, how I was like, I can forget that I've got all these other kind of identities, like hairstyle and tattoos and all that, but like my Blackness, my brown skin, I've never not met anybody ever who like, oh yeah, I forgot that it was there. It's
right.
Yeah, just kind of part of our experience. When or why have you found that it does not matter or matters less or is less relevant?
Less relevant? I think so. This is an interesting question because I really thought about this when I was in grad school working on my my dissertation, which is all about identity, social identities. So like your race, your gender, for example, your sexuality, and how you kind of like navigate that, especially when you're someone who like identifies as a marginalized identity, So I think like for someone who feels that being Black is so important to me, I've been actually wanting to like think about who I am, not outside of my Blackness, because there is no such thing, but like within my core identity, like my personality, and my spirituality. But what I'm finding is that it really beautifully intersects with all of my identities. And so I think, to answer your question, when I guess it becomes less like not relevant, but less important as like the only thing about me when I really reflect and experience and allow the different parts of my identities to show up and to explore them. Then it's kind of like just another identity that I happen to have. And like there are also other parts of myself that matter and that I can figure out and have fun with and explore. Which movement and pole dancing has really like given me I guess an outlet to kind of like explore all of those different identities and how it reflects or shows up in my song choices that I like to dance to. I've also been like moving to music that I typically wouldn't dance to because it isn't something that relates with my Blackness or with my womanness or with my queerness or something. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess it becomes less and less important as a unique feature when I validate the other features of myself.
Mm. That gets me to thinking, because I'm writing notes here as you're speaking, and then like kind of just lightly reflecting on similar experience or my own experiences, like within the Black community or within Black communities and outside of them, and or like finding intersections. And it got me thinking about how my brother went to a high school that was predominantly Black, but I went to one that was predominantly white. And so we had some interesting,
That's so interesting.
Yeah, contrasting experiences. And, but definitely, especially middle school, moving into high school, I remember, I had a hard time making friends, like, because I listened to rock music. And so I wasn't Black enough. But then when I was hanging out with the white friends, I wasn't white enough because I'm Black, because, my physical features. And so when you're talking about like getting or connecting more with either, so I have written down here, you saying core identity or core personality, or just these other parts of who you are, I'm wondering, are all these communities that kind of aren't ready and willing to accept, whether it's Black folks or queer folks or whoever it is it just because we're not open to acknowledging those identities, the multitude, seeing that it lies in kind of a bigger picture? See where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I do. And I would say like, from my experience with like, my business, with my students, because we talk a lot about like identity, with my peers, my colleagues, I see a lot of like people accepting like their dimensions and wanting to figure out what it means to be me as like a person in context, and not just in the context of my race, but also in the context of my gender and where that fits with my race. And I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, I would say like what you said really relates to me as well, because when I was in high school, I definitely had that experience of just kind of like not really fitting in, because I was either too Black or too white. And like, it's just so interesting because I'm not even biracial. And people often assume that I was, but both of my parents are Black. It's just, I'm influenced by my environment, by lots of different things. And there's no one way to be anything, let alone one way to be Black. But I think this is something that, especially like in my research and identity development, this is something that many of us come to understand, like as we develop our identities and as we get older, and we kind of like can consult with like our ideas that we learned from media or from community or from school about what it means to be Black, for example, since we're talking about being Black. And we kind of like, okay, that's not true. That's just like something that I learned, and why did I learn that? And so what I like to do is I really like to help people to unpack these beliefs, like, and figure out, well, why do I have these biases? Where did they come from in the first place? And how can I create my own narrative that serves me and reflects me? And I think that's when liberation happens, when we realize and allow ourselves to like create our own stories. Yeah.
I like that, which moves into this next question wonderfully, because I have written down your liberation and self-worth, self-work, which about the same. So for philosophy or critical thinking, one or both, how are they relevant for you personally or professionally? Especially professionally, I'm very interested in how you explore that a little bit. Why they're relevant, why they are important, philosophy and critical thinking for you.
Yeah, I think that philosophy and critical thinking is really just like the it's a part of the human experience, if that makes sense to me. I think this is what makes us human, by questioning our experiences, questioning things we thought we knew, and always working towards growing in ourselves. And that's a very important part of self-work, working on yourself, right? And so I have a podcast on as a part of my my Pole and Liberation School online on Patreon, and my podcast is really centered on that, like challenging my students to really think about things that they thought they knew, to really think about what it means for them to be creative, where they draw inspiration from their creativity, and the different parts of themselves, and the relationship between navigating their identities and figuring out who they are, and their movement experiences, their movement journeys, and their pole journeys. So that's where I like to bring it together. And I like to frame it as just like, this is what makes you a human being. And through reflecting on all of these things, you can really improve your self-work and work towards work towards understanding yourself more. I think when we understand ourselves and how we operate more, as opposed to like finding problems with ourselves, and just understanding that like this is the way we are, and this is when we can practice radical self-love and like liberate ourselves from the expectations to be what people want us to be, what we think society wants us to be. So it's a very important part of my work, for sure.
I have written down here, seeing ourselves in context, and that is just coming around and around and around again. I love it.
Yeah.
Relating your work with pole, specifically pole training, and why people, predominantly female identifying, why people will come to you. It comes from often this place of wanting to do work with their sexual selves. And so thinking critically, and perhaps looking at someone who's not ready to say, yes, I want to do my self-work, but is interested in exploring those more sensual, those softer things. Like, how, if you're comfortable with answering, how do you speak to those folks? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that exploring your sexuality is natural, and it's a part of who you are, and it's something that you don't have to share with anyone if you don't want to. And so I do have like students that I work with on just like understanding who they are, number one, and then like expressing that with movement, expressing that with the shapes that they make and why they want to make those types of shapes with pole. I also help them to really like understand their bodies and how their bodies work, and creating a space where this is something that they can do for themselves. And I think that's what I love most about the fact that my work is online. It's not like anything that you have to do in person in front of like a group of people that you don't know. It's just for you. And some people that do work with me are also performers like myself. And they either, most of the time when people work with me on like exploring their sexualities through dance, it's something that they experience for themselves. It's not something that they do to like their work if they're a performer. It's just like as a way of like coping with stress, or just having a personal practice that they can have for themselves at home. And I help people to understand that there's really no need to have a shame for their sexualities, because that's what makes you, whatever your sexuality is. And so it's really like a safe space to to understand who you are and how your sexuality works and how to express that in a way that you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I feel like all of those pieces, all of those elements are really important to highlight, either for people who know that or have an idea that, you know, this is what they kind of want to do some flexibility work. They want to look like you, or people that they see online who look like you doing the things that you do. And for folks who maybe aren't considering it or just wondering, like, why would someone do what you do? And that is that critical thinking piece, that there's all these different elements that come together to obviously create this very beautiful art, these beautiful movements and whatnot. But also there's trying to avoid using work. There's things that we do, you know, that connection, the body connection, the other stuff will happen as you are forming this kind of superficial thing that you are seeing. So thank you for detailing that.
I also like to remind my students that, like, I know people might find me, or, for example, or someone else that they admire online and they want to dance like them or do what they do. But I also always like to remind them and to frame like this experience as like they're creating their own journey, and you get to find your own style and figure out like what shapes your style, what it is that you want to do, and how do you want to move and how you want to feel it. And so I like when that happens, because then I can just kind of like help them to reframe and bring them back to ground them in their own journeys, which I think makes it more aligned with like the self-work piece.
Nice. In general, in this current era, how do you find critical thinking or philosophy to be important as a parent? Or as a partner, just as someone who is not alone. You know, none of us are alone in this world, and so your particular relativity is, you know, with your work and with your family.
Well, I think I can talk about from the context of being a parent to a little girl who was assigned female at birth, you know, so we're raising her to be a girl. And I think that I want my child to really always question everything, and to not just like think, for example, like when I was younger and I thought like, oh, I'm not Black enough, or I can't fit in with the white kids. Like, and then in my mind, I learned, oh, Black means a certain thing. I want her, although I know she's going to go through her own racial socialization process and her own ethnic identity development process, but I want to raise her in a way that helps her to affirm that like she is who she is, and because she is who she is a Black person. She is whatever it is that she identifies. There's no one way to be that identity. And so like I really think about like how we raise her and like the types of clothing that she wears and why she wears this type of clothing, and toys, for example. Any parent will tell you, like if you go to like any type of like kids store, Target really, and you go to the kid aisle, like everything is very like gendered, you know, and it's like from the time they're infants to, oh my gosh, everything is pink is for girls, blue is for a boy, and then certain girl toys like kitchens and cooking supplies and fake kitchens and stuff like that, while boys get Legos. So what I like to do is I like to expose her to all of those different types of like toys, you know, so that she doesn't grow up thinking like, oh, being a girl means that I have to be domesticated and learn how to cook and clean and stuff. You know, meanwhile, my boy cousins, they were playing with these cool trucks and dinosaurs. Like, she has all kind of trucks and Legos and blocks and all these type of things that prepare kids for critical thinking and math and engineering and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a part of like my relationships with my partner, with my child, with everyone. Definitely.
I think, yes, that moves us into existential dilemmas. And I know I just put an ellipses after that. Just what is your relationship with existential dilemmas? How can you advise anyone who finds themselves in this kind of in a fundamental, foundational dilemma or crisis nowadays? What you were just saying about how these toys can influence the way that we think is making me think of taking this into like down the queer route and how we've been influenced in these ways. But I just want to leave it open to you. What is your relationship with existential dilemmas?
I'm not sure. I think maybe it wouldn't differ from what anybody would experience. Like, I think about what my purpose is, why am I here? Often, I guess I think about these things. I guess when I'm not really sure of like where I'm going in life or my career, I sometimes think, well, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And I just like to remind myself that like there's really no, well, this is my own perspective. There's really no like divine reason why I'm here. I'm just here because my parents decided to, you know, have sex that one time and then they got pregnant with me. So I'm here and I'm just like trying to navigate my life and create life and pass on the baton to my child. But yeah, when that happens to me often, but I try to remind myself like it's really not that deep. It's just we're here, and maybe the purpose of being here is to just like be here and let the world know you were here. And I think that's what I'm doing in my own way.
You are letting the world know you are here.
Yeah, like that Beyonce song. I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I love that song.
Yeah, I think that is really helpful, especially as me personally. I am that person who will get really deep with things, who will think far too deeply, and it's only too deep because it prevents me from moving physically or mentally or spiritually at times. And so no matter whether we I think whether we feel a little bit differently, that yes, I know that I am here for a purpose. I know that I've got some divine connection or whatever, however we might describe it. Your perspective is useful for us all. If we just kind of like slow ourselves down and just think, you know what, my parents did what they did one night, and here I am. And
right, like it's just, you know, my child is gonna ask the same question, and then she might ask me, and I'm like, well, you're here because you're here. Like, you're the same reason I'm here.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, that's just my perspective.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So postpartum, that is part of your work that I do not follow because I do not have those certifications or that experience. But can you speak just a little bit about that? Do you mind?
Yeah, I don't mind. I think it's so interesting because I actually just made the group private. But and that's important to what I'm going to say, but it's really a space for people that have had babies, that, you know, pull through their experiences having babies, our parents, and we have like experiences that like people who don't have those experiences don't have, and it can make your relationship with pole challenging in many ways. Number one, it can be physiologically challenging because like if you started pole dancing, for example, like me, before you had a baby, and then you had a baby, like it feels different, like your body feels different. Your sexuality, since we were talking about earlier, your relationship with your sexuality might change, because a lot of like identity changes when you become a parent. There's many people, especially women and femmes, talk about a loss, frame it as like a loss of identity, which really, it's, from my experience, it's really a shift. And it's I think pole can be really powerful in helping you to reconnect with the way you experienced yourself before you had your child, and also help you to realize that you're still that same person. It's just, you know, you've acquired, instead of losing an identity, you've acquired a new identity, another identity to add in the identity mix that we have. Like, you know, your race, your gender. Now you're a parent, you're a mom, or you're a parent. So that's number one. And then number two, kind of like I already segued into number two, but yeah, like psychologically a shift. Who am I? Also what a lot of people think about what people are going to say about them if they're pole dancing online and their parents, you know, or if there's any sign that you live with a child. I remember when I used to post, when I was a stay-at-home mom working on my degree, and like, yeah, I have a child. I'm not going to like try to hide that I have a child. I would just post videos of myself. And then like maybe my child's like toys were in the frame, or she's in the frame, and like most people just like, wow, related to it. And that's why I started Postpartum, because I wanted to separate. And then some people were really judgmental, like, how dare I have a pole in the same space as where I raised my child? And it's like, I thought it was so interesting, because it's like, listen, like, whether I can't separate these two identities, like it's always going to be a part of me. And like, how dare you try to sexualize my child's relationship with the pole when you have no idea? Like, that's not even what my child is thinking about when she sees a pole. It's just like a
it's another toy.
It's literally a toy, you know? And so I began to feel a little frustrated, but I knew that I wasn't the only one that had this experience of like, not only has my body changed, but now like I have to deal with the assumptions people have for me because I'm a mother that poles, and that I have to pole a certain way, or I can't show certain things, or I have to clean up my place to make sure no one knows that there's evidence that a kid lives here, you know, to be respected. And so that's why I created Postpartum, and I recently made the page private, and just so that it can be a safe space for primarily women and femmes to like be inspired by each other, and also talk about these things, and like answer questions without feeling like people who are going to judge them negatively have things to say, and also without feeling pressure to move or present yourself for the male gaze, because I don't have any men, like cisgender men in that page at all anymore. There were a few, and then I deleted them so that we could just have this counter space for ourselves. But yeah, it's something that is a lot for one person to handle. And so I thought, you know what, there's so many pages for that amplify diverse experiences in pole. So I just wanted to kind of like create a space for this specific experience that I know many people have. And so far it's been dope. It's been really cool to have that space.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, as an outsider, thank you, or I appreciate you for creating that space. I have several friends in the pole community who are parents, and it's been interesting, you know, knowing a few of them before they had one or more children, and similar experiences that, you know, they just plenty of things that they haven't been able to talk about, can't relate to their like non-polling parent friends.
Yeah.
You know, these identity things that are coming up, have come up and continue to as their children get older, as they try and, you know, compete or stop competing, just all that stuff. And so I definitely applaud you and appreciate what you're doing on their behalf.
Thank you. Yeah, it's dope.
So is there anything else you would like to say or share? Anything we haven't gone over while you have this space?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me. I enjoyed chatting with you today, and yeah, I think that I spoke. I'm comfortable with what I've said. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much for your time and your energy.
Thank you so much. It was cool to chat with you again.
Indeed, indeed. Have a great day.
You too, Joy.